Why does learning feel so hard for so many people?
I think it's because we've never been trained to understand how our brains work. When we're learning, we're trying to be somebody different than who we are. We're trying to look good. We're trying to impress the people around us. And we're trying to do all of that without an actual understanding of the mechanisms in our brain that make learning happen most effectively, most efficiently, and even most joyfully.
When someone finally understands how their brain learns, what changes for them?
They become more organized, they become more interested, they become more willing, and they actually feel better about themselves because they're working with their natural capacities and tendencies rather than against them.
What would happen if every parent, teacher, student, tutor, anyone who is working with learning, if they knew how learning really works?
If everybody in the whole conversation did, then learning would become this delicious co-creation together where everybody is offering their expertise and their skill level from whatever perspective they're coming from, and they're able to contribute to the conversation, both the conversation about the content, but also the conversation about the process as we're all learning together. I think it would just be more leveling the playing field between the experts and the novices, so to speak.
Most of us were never actually taught how to learn. We were taught content, but not the science of understanding, remembering, or self-regulating. And for many learners, especially neurodivergent minds, that gap can feel huge. What if the way we've been approaching learning is actually holding students back? In this conversation, you'll hear from Gretchen Wegner, educator, academic coach, and founder of the Anti-Boring Learning Lab, where she teaches practical, science-based strategies that work for the diverse, beautiful, complex learners we see every day. Gretchen's work reimagines studying, executive function, and self-regulation so that every type of mind, especially the ones who have been overlooked, can finally thrive. All of this week on The Joy of Neurodiversity. Hey, it's Joy, and this is the Joy of Neurodiversity podcast. Here we break down stereotypes, celebrate the brilliance of different minds, and get real about what it actually means to be neurodivergent. Because at the heart of it all, neurodiversity isn't just a concept, it's people. It's lived experiences, challenges, strengths, and the stories that connect us. Whether you're here to learn, feel seen, or reimagine what's possible, you're in the right place. By pressing play, you're choosing to embrace a new way of thinking, one that honors every brain for what it brings. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the Joy of Neurodiversity, where we explore how brains of all kinds learn, grow, and thrive. You're truly in for a treat today. Gretchen Wegner is here, and we can't wait to get into this conversation. So thank you so much for being here, Gretchen. I'm so excited to have you.
Oh, I'm happy to chat with you this morning. Morning for me, night for
More
you.
morning for me. Listen, like to the listeners, this 12-hour time change between us right now is a lot, but I'm so excited. It was worth the wait. So, shall we just jump right into the conversation?
Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. I really wanted to start just with the foundation about learning itself. I think I talked to you at some point about I'm constantly getting teachers, parents, even myself coming up and just thinking about, I don't really know if I really know how to learn, if I know how to study. And we're really talking about it constantly in education, but most of us have never really stopped to ask, what does it actually mean to learn? And so I just wanted to dive into some questions to see what is really going on in our brain and what we're doing to learn properly. You've spent
Yeah.
years studying. Yeah, I know. You've spent
Well,
years studying like the science of learning. Do we misunderstand what it actually means to learn?
I should probably come up with a way to talk about the different approaches to thinking about learning. The
Mm,
way I'm going to offer a definition right now that is from the science of learning, specifically cognitive scientists, but I actually want, if you're willing, I'll tell it to you, and then I want you and then the listeners, you can think this to yourself to say, how does this land for you? Does this sound like learning, or is learning more than this? So you
okay.
ready?
Yeah.
Learning is the process of transferring information and skills into our long-term memory.
Okay.
Does that feel like, oh, that's a good definition? Or is it like, I don't know.
So, the thing that pops up for me, it's really random. You know that movie Inside Out?
Yeah, of course.
And because everyone, like, I can't tell you how many kids the second they hear my name, they're like, oh, like Joy from Inside Out. And I, I just keep on thinking of that random song that keeps popping up in her brain. Do you remember this part?
I
It's
don't
like,
remember this
so
part.
there's like, there's this random song from like that at any given moment, like she just starts hearing, and I can't even remember what the song is, but at any given moment, like this random song keeps popping out. And that's how my brain is. Like
Mm.
I'll be doing something and I'll recall things that I learned
Mhm.
like a weird song, this random fact. And I'm just like, where did
Mhm.
that come from? And I know it's in my long-term memory, but I'm just like, did I intentionally learn it? So it does
Right.
land, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how that happened. I know that was a roundabout answer to like a roundabout
Yeah.
way to get to that, but
No, well, it's an interesting question you bring up, how much intentionality goes into learning. And
mm,
I have a colleague, shout out to Susanna. She's in the Anti-Boring Learning Lab. That is the community and set of courses that I run.
yes.
And I have a model that we'll likely talk about in a little bit. I call the study cycle. And I
Okay.
use the word study. Susanna and others like to call it the learning cycle because they like to think of learning as sort of the biggest goal we're moving towards. And I love to use the word study, first of all, just because I like alliteration and study cycle sounds nice,
Yes.
but also because when students hear the word learning, I think they think of something passive, like I'm just learning, like somebody's teaching
Yeah.
and I'm learning, I'm receiving. But the word study has potential to be more active. Although I know a
Okay.
lot of students think that just rereading their notes might be studying. Studying is more active than that. And so I that's why I like to use the word study. But I do think it's an interesting question you bring up. How active does learning need to be? I also think so much more is involved in when we're truly deeply learning something than just, it sounds so flat to say getting it into long-term memory. So
Yeah.
I'm working on a definition that works for me. I don't have it yet, so I can't roll it out. Bring me on to the podcast next season and maybe I'll have it.
You are welcome
Uh,
anytime. I guess for me, studying feels a little bit scary even now as an adult because I know for so long studying scared like I didn't do it, and everything like I my survival was just based on because I can memorize things
right?
naturally. When I was so
Yeah,
growing up with dyslexia and not knowing how to read, it my survival was being able to remember things that I heard,
to
and
hear
then
it
even
and register it.
yeah, and so I
Mhm.
even feel like when I went to uni, when I like through grad school, I did well and I was able to study, but it was something that I was really enjoying. At even to if I have to retain information that I'm really not interested in, that scares me because I'm not even sure if I know the process to do it, if that makes
Right.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe by the end of today you will.
I listen, I'll take it. Not sure I'm gonna go back to school again, but there's always something I'm gonna need to learn. So yeah, absolutely. But no, so I guess it does. It does land, but I wonder how everything falls into place. I know that you're going to talk about
Yeah.
this today. And I really do, and I don't know why I didn't make the connection between like your brain and learning, why that doesn't.
Duh. Sorry. It's just funny.
I mean, yeah, yes, I clearly made that connection.
Yeah.
But it didn't really think about it like, oh, it's our brains. And,
Yeah.
I think that what I know that you've said is that students have brains, but they aren't really taught to use them effectively. And so maybe that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I really haven't
Yeah.
looked at that process. What made you first realize that we really weren't being made to use our brains effectively? And how
Yeah.
did you pull in that work?
Well, let me give you, if it's okay, just a brief, I'll make it super short, but
No,
history of how I came into
take
this
your
work.
time.
Um, I, well, you could go way back if you wanted to when I was the oldest kid walking a group of younger kids to the bus stop every day in Houston, Texas. And I made lesson plans for what the kids were going to learn on that walk.
Oh,
And they sure
wow.
didn't follow my lesson plan. So I have been a teacher from the earliest days.
Yeah.
Um, Fast forward to my first job, I worked for an educational theater company in Inver Grove Heights, Minnesota called Climb Theater. And I like to mention this because Climb was an acronym that stood for Creative Learning Ideas for Mind and Body.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so back then I think you could say that the Anti-Boring Learning Lab is very connected. We're looking for creative learning ideas for
Mm,
students and educators because we are learners too,
yeah.
minds and our bodies. And that's what we study and practice inside the Learning Lab today. But then fast forward to, I realized I wanted to be a classroom teacher, but I needed to go back to grad school, not just grad school, but I need to go back to like, what was I going to teach? I'll teach
Mm,
history. So let me go take a bunch of history classes and blah, blah, blah. I did go to grad school and get my master's in education. I got a job after some rigorous student teaching in Austin, Texas,
okay.
where you and I are going to see each other
I
in a few
know.
months.
So excited.
And then, though, I got a really cushy teaching job
Ooh,
here in the Bay Area, Oakland, California, and I hated it.
okay.
And one of the things I hated was making kids do things they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I was like, I think by definition, being a teacher means that you're willing to take that on and you're finding creative ways to help kids do things they don't
Mhm.
want to do. And I didn't like that. And I eventually wasn't quite fired, but I was not recontracted. And then I landed completely accidentally. I was looking for tutoring jobs because that's the word we know, right? If you
Yeah.
can't teach, you tutor, maybe.
Yes.
And I landed in academic coaching.
Oh,
And
okay.
now also, I mean, it's related to executive function coaching, which is the phrase that's all the rage these days.
Absolutely.
But that was my opportunity to finally be one-to-one with students and getting to talk about their learning, their
Mm.
organization, their time management. And I was doing an okay job. I mean, I liked it a lot, and I think the students liked working with me. But I was noticing there were things that were hard for them to follow through on still, even though I was trying all the tricks I could think of.
Mm.
And then I went to a conference called Learning and the Brain. It was
Okay.
here in San Francisco back in 2013. And that's when I first learned about the science of learning. I never learned about it in my grad school, even my master's in education.
Me
And
neither.
it right?
Yeah.
Like, why is that? I think that's changing now, I think.
Okay.
But it's really sad, actually, that so many of us have so much higher learning and have not been exposed to this understanding of what actually is happening in the brain when we're learning. And I learned like one or two facts, like retrieval practice was one of them, the power of testing ourselves to see what we know and what we don't know. And
Mm.
we'll likely talk about retrieval practice in more detail in just a little bit. But that's one of the things that I learned that I started coming back. And at this point, I had about maybe, I was full at about 16 clients. And I started just teaching all my clients, like, I learned this stuff.
Yeah.
Let me teach it to you. But I didn't have a lot of time, just like
Mm.
classroom teachers don't have a lot of time. It's like I had just 50 minutes that I had to like do all kinds of stuff with the students, including late work and whatever else. So I had to figure out, how do I teach this in the most powerful way possible
Mm.
to get the student into effective action? And that's when I developed a philosophy that we now have in the anti-boring learning lab called the least you need to know.
Okay. So
The least,
you're gonna have to tell me now, because now I'm like, but what is it? What did you do?
what's the least you need to know? Yeah, well, that's where I'm almost done with my story, and then
Yeah.
we can dive into some of
Listen,
that, the least you need to
you
know.
can take your time. You can tell me. I don't even have to ask you any questions. Just go with it, because I'm so intrigued.
For the listeners, Joy had a list of a bunch of questions for me, and I was like,
Listen.
we're not going to need them. Good
Well,
questions.
okay, in fairness, I'm sending you these questions and I'm like, Joy, you're not getting through any of these questions. Like, why are we even bothering? But in my neurodivergent brain, I need to feel
Yeah,
like I made some effort to be kind of organized. Do I stick to them? No. But does it make me feel a little bit better? It's kind of like
absolutely.
I'm good for putting things on a to-do list and I never do them. And then I come back and I'm just like, but there was a whole bunch of stuff I did do. So I'm just going to put them on these lists and move them over. So,
Yeah, well, and it was a good thing to do. I don't
yeah.
at all think that it was bad of you to make that list, right? Because actually, from a learning perspective, you were
Mm.
warming up your neural pathways.
Yes.
You were getting your own prior knowledge about what we might talk about kind of together. Like if you think of clay, messy clay, like you were getting it put
Yeah.
together in a shape so that today we could build off of your prior knowledge. And that is a very
Hmm.
smart learning move. So I just
Okay.
want to say smart learning move, but we're not actually following them, which is great.
It's good.
That's
And you know
a
what
good
else
thing.
ends up happening? And I should like, and I don't know what this is. Maybe you can tell me what it is. I've been really busy the last month. So like I was in Kazakhstan for the World Inclusion Congress. I've been back here. I've been doing all these like speaking engagements and all things of things. And like my brain is just all over the place because I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. And something
Yeah.
about kind of going through the rhythm of figuring out questions made me feel a little bit more centered, if that makes sense. And I'm sure that there's something cognitively that's happening
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not something that I can rattle off to you what's
Yeah.
going on, but it makes total sense to go from scattered to having some kind of shape. What
Yeah.
I call that in our anti-boring toolkit is we call that honing your notes. Like taking something that's
Mm.
either scattered or that's in a certain order. Like if you're paying attention to a lecture, the lecture is formatted in the order that the speaker thinks is important. They're the
Yeah.
expert. Now,
Yeah.
many of us try and just memorize things in that order because that's what we think we're supposed to do. We're supposed to take the experts and for people who can't see, I'm putting my hands out right now like the expert is outside of my body and then smushing all their information into my head.
Mm.
But actually, the best way to do that, the best way to learn deeply is to take what the experts have given you and then practice retrieval. So test yourself to see what you remember, but also put it in a different order, organize it in a way that makes sense to your unique brain. And that
Mm.
process of organizing information is creating the fancy word, I think they call it is schemas, is
Yes.
building schemas for that information or that skill set that you're working on. And so that's what you were doing. And when you have a schema that you can see more clearly, of course, you're going to feel calmer and
Yeah.
more organized, especially because this is a vulnerable thing to go on camera with a microphone to lead a conversation and you want to sound smart. And you probably
Yeah.
have a lot of ingrained stories that you're not so smart
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you had dyslexia and that's what the world told you earlier. So,
Yes.
yeah, it makes total sense you did all that.
But I love coming on and talking to people. So it's also like my comfort place. So it's a little bit,
Totally.
yeah. But you were telling me there was a little bit left about your story. So I want to make sure you're able to say that. But
Yeah. So at some point, I started writing online a blog about everything that I was learning about coaching students. And the name anti boring came to me because I was like, what am I doing with these kids when I'm teaching them the science of learning? Which, by
yeah.
the way, as I was experimenting, teaching everything I'd learned at that conference, the students were taking more effective action than I
Mm.
had seen them take before. Now it's just a set of 16. I didn't have a formal experimental study, right? But I was like, something is powerful here. And I started calling the tools the anti-boring tools
Okay.
that I was teaching. And the reason I did that is because I'd noticed with teenagers, I would say, like, I can make school interesting or I can make school fun. And they're like, huh, yeah, right. Like,
Yeah.
you can't make it interesting. You can't make it fun. And so finally I decided to tell them the truth. And I was like, you're right, I can't, because interesting and fun is inside your body and brain. But what I
Mm,
can do is make it anti-boring. I can
okay.
teach you tools so that you don't bore your own brain when you're learning, because goodness knows it's nice to have an interesting teacher, but we're not all so privileged that every teacher is interesting. And
Yeah.
so you get to know the tools for how to make it anti-boring or interesting to yourself at any given time. And so now the anti-boring toolkit is these set of little 10-minute conversations you can have with students. And I'll share some aspects, not just aspects, I'll probably share some of those with you next.
Okay.
Um, and then
Can
the
I ask
strategies
your
that go alongside them.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
The students that you were working with when you were
Yeah.
going through and tutoring, were they students who were struggling? Were there students who, I find like you have students who are struggling. You have students whose parents just like make sure that they're constantly in tutoring.
Yeah.
And so I was like, were
Yeah.
they students that were struggling and they just didn't enjoy school? Were they students whose parents were just making them come and maybe they were just like, I'm overscheduled, like I'm just over
Yeah.
this? Who were you working with
Love
at that
that you
time?
asked, because it's important to say, especially given the name of this podcast, they were all neurodivergent in some
Mm,
way. Most of them had ADHD. Some were not necessarily neurodivergent, but did have extreme anxiety or
okay.
depression that they were battling.
Mm,
Some had other learning differences. There was the rare student who was undiagnosed, um, or even went to a neuropsych, and the neuropsych said, maybe a tiny little bit of executive function challenges, but really, I think they just need some tools and strategies.
okay.
So maybe a quarter of my client load was that kind of kiddo,
Mm,
sort of that middle of the road kiddo in class who has never been trained how to think actively about their learning and
yeah.
needs some direct instruction around that. But most were super struggling because they were neurodivergent.
But you also work with everyone. I can
Yeah.
sometimes I can I can see teachers. I do a lot of work coaching teachers with teaching how to teach, and sometimes I'll get those teachers that say, "But my students are really like my students are high performing. Like I don't need to know these things. Like they're just and
Mhm.
I'm just like, but you're always
Yeah.
going to have just because students are high performing doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be able to have different strategies and
Yeah.
techniques that might make them more excited about what they're learning. So I was
There's
wondering what you have.
also what's the stress load of those high performing students,
Yes.
and also, does high performance equal high masking? Are they really masking? How much is their performance tied to their deep sense of connecting with themselves and connecting with their natural ways of interacting with the world? Or how much have they had to cut themselves off
Yeah.
from their natural tendencies to meet a performance level that their parents and their teachers and the world has told them they should meet? But they've
Mm,
just, all their energy is going to that performance
yeah.
instead of actually to all the things that humans need to be happy and healthy.
It's so interesting that you say this. I was to dinner with a friend last night. Um she's like this amazing homeschooling mom, and she has this huge network of families that she works with, and but her journey started because of the needs that she had for um her own children. And she was talking about one of her children who she's like, I've seen how as schooling progresses and as she gets a little bit older, her personality has changed a little bit. And I'm
Mm.
wondering if it's just overwhelmed from school, or if it's and she was talking about that, and I was like, I talk to so many parents who say the same thing. Like their children are doing fine, or teachers who are like their students are doing fine, and then literally it's like they almost get to a cutoff and everything changes and they realize that there's this underlying issue that they hadn't addressed, and they were masking, they were covering, like they were coping very, very well, and then they just got to that threshold where they weren't able to anymore, and things just fell apart. And then from there, like, what do you do to try to figure out
Yeah.
how to support them in the best way possible? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And what role are parents playing in the high performance of their students? Not to take away that students are, they they're getting the grades they're getting on their own. I don't want to say that
Mhm.
they're not, but how much are parents holding up the rest of their lives? And then when they transition to college, as many of these students then do, colleges are seeing the mental health issues rising, and some of that is because students don't know how to just be a regular, organized human in the world because their parents have been stepping in doing that role for them. But would you like to move to hearing a little something about what the least you need to know is about the science of learning?
Well, yeah, so my the one question that kept on coming up was, what was it that, because I mean, we've all
Mhm.
been to a conference or found a new piece of information that just blows your mind, right? And you're
Yeah.
just like, so I wanted to know, what was it that was just like, okay, this is something that I need to understand better, but then something that I need to implement because I was like,
Mhm.
I would love to know what that journey was, and then how did it come to
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think if you're okay with it, I'm going to give a backwards answer
Yeah, please.
because there are too many lectures that I've learned to give students, and now I train people to do, that are rooted in the science of learning. One has come more recently to me. It's the cognitive overload mini lecture, and then the
Mhm.
other one is the study cycle. Now, the study cycle is what I was sharing back in 2013 with those students. So I will talk to you a little bit about that. But I think right
Yeah.
now it's easiest for the listeners if we start with overload and then move to studying, if that's okay.
Listen, because overload is something that I struggle with.
Yeah. You defined it earlier. I think it was on while we were recording that you defined how you were feeling about your
Yeah,
list, putting the list of questions together.
yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, we'll get an answer to why that list was feeling so good for you in a moment.
Okay.
So normally with my mini lectures, I draw them out on a whiteboard. We're here, this is a podcast, so it's audio, so I'm not doing that right now. But what I like to
I
do
mean,
is,
you could if you want to. We have people can come over to YouTube and watch us if they need to. So follow
it's
your
true,
heart. Yeah.
it's true, but it will slow us down a little
Yeah,
bit if I
that's
do that.
fine.
And I
Yeah.
know that we're going to go on tangents. And so, but what I will say is if people want to see me lead either or both of these mini lectures on video, they're actually available inside the free library, inside the Anti-Boring Learning Lab.
Yeah, and I was
And
about to say,
so,
you have
and
so
that's available
many.
for,
Yeah, you have so many
yeah,
free resources, and we're gonna talk about them again. But as we're talking, if you feel like there's something that came up that you have a free resource for that people can refer to, just drop it,
great,
and
great.
then I'll
Yeah,
drop
I'll
things
shut
into the show
it
notes. Yeah, please do.
down. Yes. Um, so I want you to, well, I'll just ask you, because this is always the question I ask students first. What types of memory do you know about? Everybody knows about some types of memory. And so what do you think, Joy, the most common types of memory that students know about are?
I honestly don't know if I know what types of memories there are.
You do. When I say it, you're going to be like,
I'm gonna be
yeah.
like, okay, okay, just go ahead.
Short-term and long-term memory.
Oh, short term. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, yes.
You're just getting fancy in your
I'm
mind.
like, is it like musical memory? Like, what are we?
Yeah, so I like to ask students that question because it's important to build off of prior knowledge. And so I
Yeah.
name yes, long-term memory. Many of the scientists say that getting information and skills in our long-term memory is what learning is all about. And you're right that there is something that people have called short-term memory, but we're not going to worry about that for right now because it's very similar to this other kind of memory that you might not have heard about, but
Yeah.
is so important to your learning. And that
Okay.
is, drum roll,
I'm
please. She's doing her drum roll. I don't know if the mic can pick it up, but
I
I see
know.
it. It is working memory.
Yes,
And
working. Yes, absolutely.
yes, those of us who work inside the world of neurodiversity probably have heard of that before. But
Mm-hmm.
working memory is kind of like a little whiteboard in your mind where when I give you information, you put it and then you do something with it. And it only lasts for a few seconds. It's not very
Yes.
long. And so, for example, if I say 1 + 2, what does that equal, Joy?
2. 1 + 2, 3.
Uh-huh. 3,
Yes.
there we go. So
Yeah.
you were using your working memory. You were putting the number
The
1, you were
1
putting
and
the plus, and you
yes.
were putting the number 2, and then you put the answer 3, and you were holding all of that for a brief amount of time, just enough to tell it to me, and then
Mhm.
probably now it's somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's your working memory, working hard to do a very simple math problem.
Mm.
But now, if I were to say, and listeners at home, you try this too, and Joy, you can try this if you want. Don't
Okay.
try too hard. Give up when your brain wants to give up, and do not use a pen or a pencil. Do not write anything down. You're using only your working memory.
Okay.
Okay, take your current age, add the number 10, subtract the number 3, divide it by 2, multiply it by 5, and what do you get?
So the reason, like, and what's funny is that I never even, like, I got past I got the age plus 10, I think minus 3,
And
but
you stopped.
yes. And
Yeah.
I was also laughing, like you're saying this, and I'm laughing because I do a workshop with teachers about working memory and kind of do the same thing. And and I'm like, oh
Uh-huh.
God, this is coming back to bite me because I make people do this.
Well, but purposely, right? Because we want folks to have the idea of, I'm not even listening anymore. My brain actually can't
Yeah.
hear anything you're saying. I'm just stopping. And that is overload. And it is where the input coming into our working memory is way faster than we can process. And
Mm-hmm.
so we have this experience of overload. Now, when I'm working with students, I'll have them actually name, do you know that experience? What does overload feel like in your body? What does it feel like in your brain? Obviously, we're not going to do that now, but I'm just giving an example of how I
Yeah,
quickly
but
define these things with a
I felt
student.
a little bit of it. Like, even with that's
Mhm.
not anything that was, like something that I needed to know, but even just like having all those numbers fly at me, like I had a little bit of like anxiety through
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Uh
Joy is touching her chest, by the way, for
yeah,
those
I'm
who
rubbing my
can't
chest
see it.
and it
Yeah.
makes
So
me
it's
think.
like, yeah, I think I stopped breathing to try and
Yeah.
remember everything. Yeah. And so
And
there's a
it
very
does,
simple.
it comes up like one of the, so in a episode last season with Dane Ray, Day was talking about how overwhelm could just feel like, you know, you're drinking from the fire hose. Like there's just
Yeah.
everything coming at you at once.
You can't even
Yeah,
drink. You can't even get it in your mouth. It's just splattering all over your body and making you wet.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. That and so that's overload. And there's
Mm,
actually a very specific reason for it that is not just helpful for teachers to know, it's very helpful for parents and students to know as well. And that is, and I think this is one of the, it's like a joke. If you believe in God or whatever makes the universe, it's a joke of the universe that the
mm,
long-term memory is technically unlimited. It's a
yes.
vast storehouse. We can get so much
Mm,
technically into the long-term memory, but working memory only, and you probably know this if you teach about it, it only houses like 4 to 7 chunks of information
yes.
at a time. And so, what a joke, creator,
Mm,
that you
yeah.
gave us this vast storehouse, but you made it go through this tiny, tiny little pinprick of a hole. And
Yes.
different brains have different capacities, but often neurodiverse folks, depending on your diagnosis, have slightly more limited working memory capacity
Mm,
than other folks.
yeah.
So it's important for students to know that brains are normal. If they experience overload, it is so normal. We all have overload because in every single brain, the working memory has very limited capacity. So
Yeah.
that's the bad news. But the good news is we can all learn strategies to help us with our limited working memory. And that's why I
Mm.
took one of your strategies away. When Joy went straight to write down the numbers, I could see because her pen went into the paper,
But
and I
I
took it
followed
away.
your directions. I
You
followed your
did. You were a
directions
good
and I did
student.
not do it. But I
Exactly.
mean, this pen is here because as you're as you're talking, I'm just like, I'm gonna wanna ask about this, and if I
Yeah.
don't write it down right now, I'm not gonna remember to go back and say it.
Right, because I'm overloading in
Mm,
some ways, not in a bad way, but here we
yeah,
are talking and you're trying to hold in your working memory the next question you might want to ask, but you're also trying to listen to me to make sure that, oh, wait, if there's something she said, maybe we should jump on that first. Or that's a lot to
yeah,
do all at once. So I'm really glad that your strategy
mm,
that we're trying to teach students how to use is to have a pen and
yeah,
paper and so that you can get it out of your working memory and into an external source that you can refer to when you need to bring it back into your
yeah.
working memory.
Like, I always have a pen, like either a notebook, a piece of paper. I can't tell you how many notes I have in my notes app on my phone or screenshots
Yeah.
that I honestly never go back and look at again. But I'm just like, oh, I want to go back and look at that thing. So let me screenshot
Mhm.
it so I don't forget.
Mhm.
So many
And it's
different
why some of
strategies.
us who do that need to have also some supports around figuring out what our organization routines are to make sure that we're going back to the notes that
Yeah,
we
clearly
took.
Joy does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just kind of thinking about what you were talking about in terms of not only the working memory, but then some of the like anxiety that kind of comes up as a result. And then how does that play into what you're able to remember, what you're not able to remember? Because I know that when your brain is not calm and ready to learn, then there's really not anything that's going to be able to get in there. And then you talked about, you know, the brain, like I had just had this mental image of it. You're like, this brain, your brain is so vast, but then at the same time, you have this tiny little pinhole. And I'm just like, that is a setup. But I
It
know you're
is
going to give
a
me some
setup.
strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that you brought up the emotional part of it because so when I draw this out for students, we draw a thought bubble, and that thought bubble has four what we call parking spots in it because we can only fit four cars in a time or four parking spots at a
Mm,
time. I mean, as I said, 4 to 7, but just four is easy to draw. And many students who are neurodivergent have a slightly lower capacity. So I just find it easy to draw the four. But then I draw 3 arrows coming into that thought bubble
okay.
because there are different kinds of things that fill up our parking spots.
Mm,
Information fills it up, like those numbers that I was sharing earlier. That's an example.
okay.
But also, our environment can fill up our spots. If there's a super interesting poster in our classroom that we gaze at, or if we are, let's just say, autistic and we're in sensory overload because of the lights can fill up
Oh
our
God.
parking spots, or the feeling
Yes.
of itchiness on our skin can fill up the parking lots. Or if we're ADHD, everything there is to attend to in our space is filling up our parking lots except the thing that actually we're supposed to be attending to.
Yeah.
So one arrow is information, the other is environment, and then the third is emotions. If we're having big feelings, if our mom or dad was stern with us that morning and we had a feeling about it, or if the cute kid that we have a crush on was talking to somebody else with a glimmer in their eye, that would fill up our parking spots for learning. So it's really helpful for students to know that it's not only that your parking spots are so limited in your working memory, but that lots of different things fill them up. And so
Oh my
so again, we need strategies for how do we regulate our emotions so
yeah.
that we can switch switch our brain a little bit to move
I'm
from the
mind
you
blown right now. Like
kids.
literally mind blown because okay, so just a little bit of backstory for me. So when I first was diagnosed with dyslexia, I wasn't even really diagnosed with dyslexia. I was diagnosed with scotopic sensitivity syndrome, which they now call Erlin
Oh,
syndrome.
oh,
And then later found out that I have Erlin's. I also have dyslexia and I have ADHD, and I didn't learn about my ADHD until about 45. But at 12, I was constantly getting in trouble. I mean, I just always got in trouble, but I am so sensitive to light. Like even if people are watching my podcast right now, like I'm in a darkish room with like a weird light behind me because
yeah,
I don't like light. And
yeah.
I used to like fluorescent lights look like strobe lights to me.
Mhm.
And school was excruciating because I grew up in Colorado and they had this weird set. Like most schools were like just these big open spaces and they put up these weird kind of partitions. And so a lot of the classrooms didn't have windows. And so if I was in a classroom that didn't have a window and I was underneath lights that looked like a strobe light, it was just torture. And so I was constantly like literally covering my eyes, covering my head,
Oh,
like
honey.
wanting to wear, and I couldn't concentrate. So for you to
Yeah,
say the environment, and then on top of that, you're upset, you don't feel good, you have a headache. So I have like
right.
environment, I'm emotional, I feel like I'm dumb. Like there was no room for my parking lot because
You
it was filled up with
you
everything else.
you had just a bunch of junky cars sitting in your parking spaces just constantly.
Not moving.
Yeah, learning can be hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then those things can feed on each other, right? Because right,
Yeah.
so the sensory stuff happens and you can't pay attention and then you tell yourself, "Oh my God, I must be so dumb that I can't pay attention right now." And then that creates a feeling inside you and that builds up parking spots. So this
Yeah.
is why the toolkit that we teach in the anti-boring learning lab, I think, is so important because we don't just teach the study skills, the learning part, we teach the executive function strategies, and then we also
Mm.
teach the emotional regulation strategies. And it's important for those of us who work with students to have what I like to call an overflowing toolkit of strategies so that we can support students in finding the right strategy necessary to help work with their overload so that they are
Yeah.
less likely to go into full on overload. I mean, we all will go into overload, but you can also watch it happening and you can understand, oh, this is happening right now. What's causing my overload? Okay, let me use the strategy right now.
Mm.
So that way, students, any student, neurotypical or neurodiverse, knows how to work with their very natural human system.
So how does okay, so your your long-term memory, is all of that part of your cognitive load, or is cognitive load something completely
Mm.
different?
Cognitive load is the stress on your working memory.
Okay.
But this was a really good question you just asked because it takes
Mhm.
me to the next thing that I wanted to share,
Okay.
which is so one of the ways with learning that we learn well, right? And I defined learning earlier as things get into our long-term memory in such a way that we can pull them out again when we need them. So the
Mm.
way to get things to stay in our long-term memory and not just disappear over time is to pull out something in my long-term memory, put it in my working memory, do something with it. And that doing something with it, especially if we're smart about the things we do,
Mhm.
smart meaning maybe we use multiple senses, we might use dual coding, we might use elaboration. There are all these scientific terms that you can do with the stuff
Mhm.
that make it go even deeper into your long-term memory so that it
Oh.
stays. And the more we pull information from our long-term memory into do something with and it goes back, it's deeper. So you could think of a highway, a bigger
Mm.
and bigger highway.
Okay.
The goal is to have pulled stuff out of our working or out of our long-term memory so many times that we feel we've built such a strong highway for that information or that skill
Yeah.
in our working memory that when we go to a testing situation, whether
Mhm.
it's actually a test or whether we have to perform something on the job or, whatever it is, even if we're stressed, our highway is so strong for that
Yeah.
information that we can pull it out and use it, even if we have a lot of emotions, even if our space, the environment is a little chaotic.
Mm.
And that's what we call teaching. Teaching supports students in both getting something into their long-term memory. That's the first exposure.
Yeah.
But good teaching helps students practice bringing it back up into their working memory over and over and over again in different ways
Gretchen, that
to
makes
help
so
them
much
do
sense.
something with it. Yeah. And then good studying
Yeah.
is you not relying on your teacher to pull stuff up into your working memory, but you understand these mechanisms so that you can create opportunities for yourself in class or out of class
Mm.
to build a superhighway between your working memory and your long-term memory.
So when you think of studying as a highway of getting that information from your long-term memory to your short-term or into your working memory,
Hmm.
it doesn't seem as intimidating to me.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, it can be intimidating if you think about it as doing the same thing over and over and over again, and
Mhm.
it's boring. And a lot of people do study that way. Like if you reread the textbook that you read to initially get it in, or if you reread your notes, that's terrible for your brain. It's very boring for your brain.
Oh,
And
okay,
your attention systems will
tell me
tune
more
out.
about that, because I can't tell you how many people are just like, "Oh, I need to write it a million times, or I need to read it, or I need to listen to it on,"
Right.
like, it's what is kind of the go-to. So tell me
Yeah.
more about why that's not effective.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell that to you by telling you about the study cycle,
Okay.
because we had said we were going to do that anyway. So the cognitive overload mini lecture that I just led you guys through, and again, you can watch me actually lead it with the whiteboard at, if you go to antiboringlearninglab.com, there's a free resources section. You can sign up there for it. And also the study cycle that I'm about to teach you can get there as
And
well.
all of this
So,
is you're offering this free to everyone, so it's just
mhm,
information. So
yeah,
please, everyone take advantage.
yeah. I might be a little nutty that I'm providing it for free, but it's
You
just so
know,
hopeful I can't
and
keep it from the kids.
listen, it's gonna come back to you tenfold, I guarantee it.
So I I developed the cognitive overload one more recently, and I'm starting to think that that's the first one I want to ever teach students, because I feel like it gives an overarching framework for everything we need for the learning strategies, the doing strategies, and the
Mm.
feeling strategies. But the study cycle specifically talks about the superhighway between
Mhm.
the long-term memory and the working memory. So in the study cycle, we draw a basket or some kind of thing. Some people these days are drawing like a laptop because so much of our learning is online. And that's
Yeah.
that's the place outside of your body where
Mhm.
information lives. And then at the top of the whiteboard, we draw a person with a brain, and that's the kid I'm talking to, and that's inside their body and brain. And it's got 3 steps, the study
Mm.
cycle. I've divided or taken all the science of learning into like the 3 steps that I truly believe are the least students need to know about studying. Step 1 is initial exposure. So
Okay.
that's the first time we
Okay.
are introduced to it. And that can happen, people who are listening to me right now for whom this is
Mhm.
new. This is your first exposure to the information. This is your step 1 on the study cycle. I sometimes call it encoding,
Okay.
because that's what the science calls the process of, creating code in your brain for some information.
Does it have to be
So
like a aha moment? Like, does it have to be like a, "Oh, that's interesting," or can it just be the first time you were exposed to it?
it's just the first time you're exposed. It's
Okay.
just the first time it doesn't have to be ahas. It doesn't have to be good feeling.
Mm.
It's any kind of exposure. So if you watch, and when I'm talking to students, we'll talk about in that class you're having a hard time with, what is your first exposure? Is it that you're reading things online? Is it that you're hearing a lecture? Is it you're
Mm.
watching a video? Is it you're reading a book? What is it? Most students stop there. Their
Okay.
only study strategies they know is to encode the way their initial exposure was. So
Okay.
rereading and
Okay.
rewatching. But
And
do you remember how many steps I said there are, Joy? It's okay if you don't, but I'm
no,
just purposely quizzing you right now. That's good
I've
because
3?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly.
Did you see me reaching for it?
I saw you reaching for it, and I purposefully did that because I said
Yeah.
it in passing, and I've learned
Yeah.
a little bit about you and your incredible brain during this
Mm,
conversation, and I wondered if that was a detail you hadn't heard. And it's an important detail, and so I
mm.
wanted to actually model retrieval practice. I asked you to go into your long-term memory, which
Yes.
it's long-term right now, and to see if you could remember how many steps there were to pull it back up into your working memory and to say it. And now I
Yeah.
bet I bet your highway is already stronger for that little
Yes.
detail.
So is your highway just building a neural pathway?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
a cognitive scientist might correct me, but I think for our practical purposes, yes, it's building a stronger neural pathway for that
Okay.
information. Mhm.
Yeah, I had to like so you did figure out my brain. So I hear things and then it just kind of sticks, but I do have to kind of like go back and like look it sounds crazy, but I have to kind of look for it
Yeah,
in
of
my mind.
course.
Like in my mind's eye
I
I'm
mean, it
kind of
doesn't
looking
sound
for it. Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, because that it looking for it in your mind's eye is going into your long-term memory and
Yeah.
pulling it back up. So it's exactly what I'm talking about. It's not crazy
Mhm.
at all.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so remind me, I don't want to get you off track, but remind me to come back to because I have a question about learning styles. 'Cause I don't really think, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
I have
Well,
so
let's
remind me to
quickly
come back to
finish up
that.
this part,
Yeah.
and that's important. We'll come back to
Okay.
that. So there are three steps that I've put in the study cycle, but the first one is encoding, is first exposure. The
Okay.
second one, step two, is the step that so many of the studies show that this is maybe the most important part of learning, which is retrieval practice, is what it's called.
Okay. Which I
Now, I've
just
already
did.
talked to which you just did.
Okay.
And I've already talked to you about it because retrieval practice is the act of going into our long term memory, pulling
And bring
something
it
out
back up.
without looking at the answer. So if you are looking
Oh,
at that's why I also didn't want you to write anything down with your pen earlier. I
yeah.
wanted you practicing true retrieval.
I see. Okay.
It is good to
So
write things down. It is
interesting.
good to take notes. But what really helps us remember it more deeply is if we practice retrieval without looking. And so
Mm,
many students wait for their teachers to test them on the test when actually they could be having lots of these mini moments of retrieval practice
yeah.
during their study sessions, even while you're listening. If your teacher pauses, there are ways that you could like look away from your notes and like close your eyes and see if in your mind's eye you could remember what she just said. That's a mini retrieval right there.
Mm.
There's so many ways to do it. And the more we practice retrieval, the better we learn something.
And if we're doing it
But
from the moment we have that initial exposure and you're constantly making that kind of trip between
Mhm,
your long term
mhm.
and it's your long term and you're working or your long term and your short term? Long term and
Long term
working.
in your working memory. I
Yeah.
mean, whether short-term memory actually exists or not is starting to be questioned. In the
Okay.
research, some people think that short-term memory is distinct from working memory. Others, I've just decided not to think about short-term memory. The most important kinds of memory are for students specifically to understand are working memory and long-term memory. So just to make it simple, the least you need to know, I've decided to
Yeah.
stay away from the whole short-term memory thing.
Because regardless of if you are trying to remember if you need a teaspoon or a tablespoon for a recipe, or if you need to figure out what words you're spelling, regardless, it's you bringing it from that long term memory up to your short time memory and applying it. So to that working memory and applying it.
Yeah,
So if it's a
yeah,
short term situation, it really doesn't make a difference because the act is the highway
yeah.
between the two.
Yeah. And short term memory, the difference, like working memory, I forget the number of seconds, but it's maybe, I don't know, up to 10 seconds is working memory. And short term memory is actually just a couple minutes, I think,
Okay.
in the research. And then everything else is long term memory. So if you remembered it a half hour later, I think that's
Mhm.
considered long term memory. It's not considered short term memory.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes me feel better on so many levels because I can't tell you how many times I walk into like another room with purpose, having to do something, and I get there and I'm just like, why did I come in this room? And so if it's
Well,
only 10 seconds, I'm like, okay, Joy, that's normal.
not only is it normal, but we as women of a certain age, meaning
Yes.
perimenopausal women, our working memory is very affected by our hormones.
Yeah.
I don't know the details of it, but anyway, just to say that even if we were super neurotypical, we
Yeah.
would have an impact on our working memory because of the age that we are.
Yeah. And then me on top of that ADHD with a million
Yeah,
different things going on in my head. I'm just like, I'm surprised I get anything finished. Okay.
totally.
I
Totally. Okay,
really
there's one more
do.
step in the study cycle, though. There's one more step I want to just
Okay.
get to quickly,
The
and it's
third
going to
one.
take us.
So encoding, retrieval practice, and the last one?
And the last one is encoding in a new way.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
So this is where anti-boring comes in because
Okay.
yes, we need repetition. We need as many times as possible coming from long-term memory to working memory, but we're going to get bored if we're just repeating it the same old way.
Yeah.
And the brain science does show that multimodal learning really helps us solidify information because we're using different parts of our brain. So we have even wider neural networks for whatever we're doing. So if you read it the first time, maybe you draw something the second time, or maybe you hone your notes rather than rereading your notes, you hone your notes, which is a practice I teach in the learning lab. Um, there are just so many different things we can do that use so many parts of our system. Maybe sing a song about it. Maybe, there
Mm.
are all kinds of different ways. But regardless, even after you've done that, it's the cycle, right? The study cycle. So what do you
Yes.
think you need to do after you try something you couldn't remember, after you try learning it in a different way? What do you think the next step is?
Going back to encoding in some way, no?
That's a great guess because I'm not making this visual right now
Yeah.
because I'm not drawing it out, but actually
Mm.
I just consider it two sides. There's the
Okay.
encoding side and the retrieval side of the study
Mm.
cycle. So once you've encoded in a new way, that's still your encoding. You're just doing it in a new way instead of the same old way. So then what do you think you would do?
Encoded in a different way.
Well, we just did that.
Oh,
So this is the power. This is so interesting that we're having
yeah.
this moment because I'm not drawing it for you. If I
Okay.
drew it the way I always draw it for students, you'd totally get it, which shows the power, everybody out there who's a teacher, of having visual models for whatever we teach.
Yes.
So it's retrieval practice. So after we do the encoding side, because even though there are 3 steps in the study cycle, there are just 2 sides the way I draw it.
Mhm.
So there's the encoding side, and we're either doing first exposure or we're doing encoding in a new way. And then after we do either of those, we practice retrieval to see what we know and what we don't know.
So it's
And then anything
sending
we
it away and bringing it back, sending it away and bringing it back.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly,
Nice.
exactly,
Okay, so I have
exactly.
a follow-up question. So
Yes,
the teacher in me
yes.
keeps thinking that, and I talked to I had to like check myself on it when I was in the classroom. I talk to teachers about it all the time. Like, we're creatures of habit. We tend to
Mhm.
teach the way that we feel most comfortable like taking in
Yes,
information. And then as
yes.
parents, when you're helping your students learn or kind of try to access information, you are doing that
Mhm.
in the way that's most comfortable for how you like to take in information. So are we hindering our students by or our by anyone that we're working with by giving them information in the way that we want to receive it ourselves? I don't know if that's a question, but
Yes, I
okay.
think so.
Mm,
I mean, that's a short answer. It's obviously more complex. I think the way that we support our students' learning truly is we teach them what the brain needs to learn, and the brain needs retrieval practice first and foremost. That's the
mhm.
most important thing. And then it needs multimodal learning. And then we need to teach students to pay attention to what mode do I need right now? Or what mode is it coming at me? So
Yeah.
for example, I I'm not going to say I'm a kinesthetic, my learning style is kinesthetic because
Yeah.
learning styles according to the research, don't exactly exist. But I do
Yes.
think preferences exist.
I
And
absolutely think preferences exist.
mhm, yeah. And so my preference is to move my body. My preference is not to take in information auditorily. And I
Okay.
have learned how to advocate for myself.
Mm.
When too much information is coming at me verbally, I have learned to interrupt it and to say, this is great. I love this. I need something visual as well. Or are we reading something? Show me where we're reading so I can read along with you. And I've
Yeah.
learned to advocate for myself. Not to, the auditory is helpful. It's in some ways a good way, from a good thing for my brain to struggle a little bit, because effort is also what creates learning. Retrieval practice is effortful, and that
Yes.
creates learning. But I need to be exposed to a number of different styles, but I can also advocate, not styles, a number of different modes, let's
Okay.
say. And I can advocate for modes,
Mm.
or I can add modes. If I notice my teacher primarily taught it in one or two styles,
Yeah.
I keep on saying styles, it's so in our language.
It's
In one or two
completely in our
modes,
language.
it's so
And
in our language.
And
Yeah.
I like that we're like kind of going back to mode. So, fun fact about me, I've been told, and I honestly think it was solely because I struggled with reading for so long, but I have always been told that I was an auditory learner. And
Hmm.
then I met my friend Sarah Habubi, who's like, she is like, she works within the NLP, and she does a lot of work with using neuro linguistic programming and visual imagery to help students who are dyslexic
Hmm.
or what have you. And so I told her that I was auditory learning. And she was like, yeah, no, I doubt it. And I'm like, what? And she was like, I bet you're visual. I bet you visualize anything. So I like to take in information.
Yeah.
I like to hear it, but I
Yeah.
automatically transfer that into a picture. I'm so visual that it's insane. And
Well,
but
guess
I
what?
mm,
Can I
what's that?
tell you something about that? And this is
Yeah.
something I learned from Krista Hopp, who I know you talked to in a
Krista's the
previous
best. Yeah, it's
podcast. She
and
is.
Krista thinks so highly of you is why I
Yeah.
wanted uh
Well,
to
we,
so that I wanted to have both of you on so people can see how your work so much like
oh,
mirrors and meshes
we
well
really
together.
do
Yeah.
dovetail. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so there are two parts of the working memory.
Yes.
There's actually more than two, but again, least you need to know. There's the, now am I going to remember them in this moment? Am I going to be able to bring them into my working memory? Anyway, there's a sketch pad, the visuospatial sketch pad, and then the phonological loop.
Oh,
And so
yes.
so a phonological loop is when you, like, if I hear your name is Joy and I walk away going, Joy, Joy, Joy.
Mhm.
Like, I'm using the words, I'm hearing the words in my head.
Yeah.
But the visuospatial sketchpad is when we're seeing visuals of things, and both of
Mhm.
them occur in our working memory. And so what I'm hearing is that your visuospatial sketchpad in your working memory is very, very strong.
Mhm. But I didn't believe that it was, or I guess I
Right.
just never assumed that it could be because I have been told
Mhm.
since I was before I was 12 years old that I was very auditory. And then it kind of scares me now because we have like these tests that we're given to students, and then we're telling like their what is it actually I'm not even going to name the test, but these tests that they're taking, and they're like, oh, your student is a visual learner, and then teachers are like, okay, well, I'm going to plan all my groups around who are my visual learners and who are my kinesthetic learners, and I'm just like, but
Mhm.
why are we doing that? Like, we need
Mhm.
to strengthen all of the ways that you can take in
Yes.
information.
Yes. And so
Mm,
I don't know what the scientists would say to what I'm about to say, but I could imagine if I went back to the classroom now, I would want to know the strengths of the people in the room, because I might want to sometimes design activities where the people who have certain strengths get to enact those strengths.
yeah.
And I imagine I might want certain activities where the people who have specific weaknesses are forced to work with those weaknesses, but in a
Yes.
collaborative environment. And there just are reasons for us to learn in a multitude of different ways and not
Mhm.
always through the lens of our strength. But from a motivation perspective,
Mm.
it's important to give ourselves permission if we know what a strength is or what an
Yeah.
inclination or preference is. Like if I don't want to start studying, and because I'm such a movement oriented person, anyone watching this videos has seen me like swaying in the camera. And
And
um,
are you at a standing
I'm
desk?
at a
Are you
standing desk.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That helped. But even if I
Yeah.
were sitting, you'd see me moving around. Um,
Okay.
so okay, wait. Now I got off track. Anyway, I forget where I was going with that. But yes, let's just learn in all the ways.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, so if I had well, no, you said that you were talking about how we need to strengthen,
Motivation.
like challenge people if you feel like they learn in one way, then we need to challenge them and learn in another. And I think it's so true. Like if someone had not challenged that I wasn't auditory, I might not have discovered that am actually very visual, and that's helped me in so many ways
Yes.
with
Right.
taking in information. Yeah.
Yes. And because then you can scan. I have another mini lecture called The Study Senses that you'd have to pay me in the anti-boring learning lab to learn. That's not available for free, but the study cycle is.
Okay, listen,
But in the study,
I'm hoping that like people who are listening to that, I hope that they all come and pay you because the information, if the information that you're giving for free is this good, then the information that you're making people pay for is just phenomenal. So please go and sign up, and we'll talk in
uh,
a bit later about how they can do that. But
yeah,
yes.
yes. Well, and just to finish the point that I now remembered I was making before, if we know we're good at something, you now with making things visual, me with moving, and also
Mm,
actually visual is a strength of mine as well. We can start when we have to do something hard. We can start with the place of our preference.
yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. We just don't want to stay there the whole
Yeah.
time and assume that this is what I need to learn and everybody else, if you can't teach me that way, then screw you.
Mm. Well,
So
and knowing how you like to bringing information because I
mhm,
always assumed that I was auditory, but I now know that I like to hear it and then I
mhm,
like to process it and kind of think it through. And so
yeah,
now that I'm more aware of that, I'm able to utilize bringing information that way. And I think that,
absolutely.
students are very well aware of how they like to learn, but then too often the adults in their lives are saying, well, no, 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 that's not how you learn. And so they're
Mhm,
changing things, right?
right. And
So,
it's all both and. It's all the like, mom, I get you like to explain it to me that way. And actually now, could you explain it this other way so I can have it both ways? Like we can learn how to advocate for ourselves so that we're surrounding ourselves with as many different modes as possible to help solidify the information even deeper in our long-term memory.
okay. No, I'm just gonna go with where you want to go with next, but I'm sure that there's some questions that are going to come up. Actually, can I just ask one because it's on my mind? One thing for me, I know with overwhelm, and if I'm jumping too far over to someone, just be like, Joy, no, you jumped too
That's
much.
great.
But one thing that I have definitely noticed with me in terms of like either learning new things or having this hang up that I am not able to learn certain things. I fall into procrastination and I just kind of freeze up. So is procrastination kind of overwhelm or us not being able to
Sure.
make those connections between our working and our long?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to extend the whole conversation into areas where it doesn't belong. And I can't
Yeah.
speak, I haven't done my own research around procrastination and long-term, short-term memory stuff, long-term
Mm,
working memory. But what I will say is that procrastination, some people say, is really a self-regulation
I
issue,
believe I can see that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, we need tools or strategies to help us regulate ourselves. So it's probably, I'm sure if we tracked when am I procrastinating, it's
Mhm.
usually like that feels bad.
Yeah.
I don't because it feels so bad, it's taking up spots in my working memory.
Makes sense.
So getting into action, like the feeling is taking up the spots, and getting into action, I just don't want to do right now. And there
Mhm.
are other things that I can do right now that will feel good and therefore erase the bad feelings.
So I'm just gonna go with it. Yeah.
So I'm just exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
Okay. Well, then if I can, so that was just my random like thought at the moment, but I wanted to come back to because I feel like even for me as an educator, as a person, there's a lot of, I think, mistakes now knowing what learning is and that it's just that exchange and that retrieval. What are some of the the biggest mistakes that you see people are making when it comes to studying or accessing information? Because I feel like at this point now there's a lot that I'm doing. So what are you seeing as, and I don't know if I
Yeah,
want to
I
see them as
mean,
mistakes, but
yeah,
you know,
certainly. Well, let's just go ahead and use the word mistakes. And mistakes aren't bad. Like from a
mm,
retrieval practice perspective, mistakes aren't bad. We want to try. We want to put in the effort to do something.
yes.
We want to see if we can remember it, and we might not be able to. And that's considered a mistake. But it's not bad. It's just
No.
like, okay, now I have more information. And so, from a learning perspective, I do see too many students. I was just reading an article about this today, actually. Even when they're aware that retrieval practice is the better thing to do, they don't
Mhm.
do it because it's effortful, and effortful is yucky. And there are other things that feel better. Like it can feel good to make yourself a whole stack of flashcards. But are you
Yeah.
actually practicing retrieval with them? No, but you feel so accomplished and you see the stack growing and it's just like, I love to buy books, but do I like to read them if I'm honest? Not really.
I love
So,
I love buying books, but I don't always read them. I think listen, flashcards never worked for me. I have never been able to make them work. And yeah. And so you
well, that
see
would require a whole new conversation that we probably don't have time to. It'd be
no.
so fun to dig in with you to be like, huh, what was going on there? Because when used well, and my
Mm,
guess is simply you just didn't know how to use them well. Like I have the most fun activity that I taught a master class on. It was actually called Beyond Flashcards for
okay.
educators, where we looked at all the other ways you can practice retrieval besides just flashcards, and then also
Mm,
all the fun ways you can use flashcards. And my guess is if we were to dig into it, we would just find that you were just using them in a boring way, because not because you anything was wrong with you, but because you
yeah.
didn't know better, because nobody knew better and trained you better.
Oh no, it was definitely a boring way. It was like,
Hmm.
look at this and remember it. Like, and I'm just like, okay, but how? Like, like literally, I remember thinking like, but how is that gonna help me? And I have, writing one thing on one side and you flip it over and write the other thing on the other side, and I'm just like, okay, but how is that
Let's
helping me?
stay. Okay,
Hmm.
let's stay for the. We now know that your brain really likes to take in information in an auditory way
Yes.
and then turn it into something visual. Flashcards
Hmm.
are neither of those. It's
Exactly.
boring information in written form, not visual. But
Yes.
what if you were to make an audio? If you had to memorize a bunch of stuff, you were to make
Mm.
yourself a voice memo that was you saying a word, pausing, and then giving the answer. Not
Mhm.
that this is fun exactly, but it might. And then you get to go on a walk with your headphones on and just practice. Can I hear the word and then say what the definition is? And
Yeah.
then listen to the definition to check myself to see if I had it right or wrong.
Mm.
That might be slightly better for you than the really boring paper
Yes.
flashcard.
And I kind of do like things like that now. So absolutely.
Well, there you go.
Okay. So is there anything I want to also talk about what you're doing to help like train teachers, but is there anything else that you think we just absolutely need to know before we move on to that?
I think I'm mindful of the listeners and their own overload, and I
Yes.
think we've hit more than the least they need to know.
But
I think we'll say that I think people got some good juicy stuff they can run
yeah.
out and play with today.
Absolutely. Like the parking lot, there's so many things that we can go back and, but you are doing amazing work with the anti-boring learning lab, and you're helping so many students and parents and teachers. And I just really want to give you an opportunity to talk about what is the work that you're doing, and then how can people take advantage. So what exactly is the
Yeah.
anti-boring learning lab, and who is it for?
hmm So it's a training ground for educators. Parents can sometimes consider themselves educators, especially
Mm.
homeschool parents or parents who maybe can't afford coaching for the student and are in a place to, maybe you have a good relationship enough with your student that they're willing to accept some support from you, then it's a great
Mm.
place for you as well. But really, we are, I like to say, educators from all the quirky corners of education. So we have academic and EF coaches, we have speech and language pathologists, we have occupational therapists, we have special educators, we have lots of people who are tucked away doing the learning support for the students who struggle the most. And we are both a community and a set of courses. So the
Oh.
cost is either a quarterly or an annual cost, but when you come in, you just have access to all the main courses from the anti-boring toolkit. And then you also, once you're done with that, have access to a bunch of advanced micro credentials if you're an obsessive learner and want to keep learning. But we also have communities of different types of educators or educators with special interests. I'm realizing as we grow, we probably need communities of educators who are based in different geographic locations so they can find each other. We have
Mm.
calls. A lot of, one woman said at one point that it feels coming to a call or even just watching the recording feels like warming your hands around a campfire, like a cozy
Oh, I love
campfire.
that.
Isn't that sweet? And so it's
Yeah.
one of these rare places in education where you can find like-minded and like-hearted educators and really feel like you're companioning each other through the really rather lonely work of
Mhm.
being an educator, and especially an educator with certain values.
Yeah.
So I hope people come find us, at least come into the free library to check out the resources on cognitive overload and the study cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know that there's also some connections that you have with Krista at Connected
Yeah.
Pathways Coaching. So what is that? And
Yeah.
how does
So
that work?
Krista has been trained in my toolkit, and she now believes, and I think I see this too, that the two best trainings for to really get executive function and academic coaches up and running is her training on executive function and the science of executive function. This is
Yes.
what both of us have in common is we have a real focus on science. Just earlier today, somebody who has an executive function coaching business was emailing me with some questions, and they were talking about the importance of time management, organization, and planning. And to me, those are skills, yes, but that's not actually executive function theory. Like to
No.
really understand what's happening in the brain with various different executive functions is so important. And Krista teaches that so well. And then alongside my toolkit for studying, we're really a powerhouse duo, I think.
You absolutely are. And just what I really appreciate about both of you is that you give so many tools that people can utilize straight away. Like, 'cause if people don't have the means to be able to maybe come and be and have a membership or what have, that they can still get really high quality access to information, that they can still help support, not only their students, but like just themselves. Like I'm gonna go, and I was, stalking you on your website a little bit, and stalking might have been stalking you on some YouTube videos just to find out, what it is that what you're doing. And it just makes, because I do have so many hangups about studying and being able to like retain information. So I was like, it's so amazing that you've done this and that you've built this community. And I can imagine that the community is a place where you can ask questions and maybe reach out for help and support from others who might be in the same space. Is that what I'm seeing happen within, like, inside the community
Abs-
space that you've built?
yes. And in fact, it's important. It's very important, this whole question asking thing.
Mm.
Students hate to do it. and educators hate to do it. And we have all talk about masking. We started this conversation with masking, and maybe we'll end. Educators, even, we've learned how to mask
Yeah.
a lot of what happens deeply inside us because the world of schooling, which has such colonial roots, I mean, we could get political around
Yeah.
that, which we don't have time for now,
No.
but it has trained people to not actually pay attention to their deep needs as humans. And this is true
Hmm.
for, especially true for teachers. And so I find that it's people are very scared. Like one of the things we do is we role play, we practice the mini lectures that I was just sharing with you. We practice teaching them in Zoom rooms with our
Okay.
colleagues. And people are terrified to do that because what if people see that they're maybe not as good a teacher or not as good a coach as they think? And
Yeah.
I work so hard to say, I want you to come and make mistakes. I don't grade you. I
Yeah.
trust that if you do the work of the way I lay out all of the work, you are going to be such a better teacher by the end of it that I don't
Mm.
need to grade you. I trust in my own curriculum and I trust in your impulses as an educator or learner. So
Yeah.
we do our
So
best to support each other.
absolutely. And it's so it like you said, there's comfort in numbers, right? So having a community
Mhm.
who's able to help support and who can answer questions or might have had some of the same concerns, like it's nice to be able to reach out just to give it a little like taste. If someone were to come and join, what are
Mhm.
some of the things that they'll have access to?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that once you get into the free library, the other thing you'll see there is that we do have every couple months, we have just a free gathering for people who are following me because I want to hear if you're trying any of the stuff that I teach. I want to hear about it and problem solve with you for free. So that's available to you. But if you come in, there are chat lounges
Mm,
where you can just ask people about anything that's come up. We call it the All About Students chat. There's also the
mm,
All About Us chat so that we can just talk about personal things. There's a side little corner of the lab where we also talk about the business of holding up private practices. So if
okay.
that's some support you want, that there's a little additional cost to that, but you'll see that there's these set of courses, 9 micro credentials that I call the anti-boring toolkit. There, anyway, there's more than that, but I don't want to overwhelm people. Those are the main
Okay.
things.
But that gives you just a little
Yeah,
bit of a take. So if someone wants to find you and connect with
yeah.
you and or connect with the
Hmm.
community, how can they do that?
Yeah, I would just go to Anti-Boring Learning Lab. And so that's no hyphen, just ANTIBORING learninglab.com. And you'll find the free resources place. Sign up for that.
Mm,
That'll also put you on my list so you'll hear any announcements. I also do a lot of blogging. I will be making more videos in the future. So there will be a lot of free resources you'll have access to additionally once you're on my list. Or go to LinkedIn and type in Gretchen Wegner. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn as well.
me too. LinkedIn's my
Yeah,
jam, honestly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Social media, can people find you on social media or is it just
LinkedIn
basically
is really the
LinkedIn?
only one. I'm on Instagram, but I don't do much with
Listen,
that.
Instagram,
So,
I do try. I do for everyone who is listening and is always asking me why am I not like I do try. I do, but it's just not in my spirit to
yeah,
to figure out how do
yeah.
I manage that.
Well,
So,
overload, right? We need to choose our specific things that we can do well. And for me, LinkedIn is the space for that.
absolutely. Okay, so if there's one thing you can leave the Joy of Neurodiversity listeners with when it comes
Mhm,
to learning or studying or you choose
mhm.
it, but what is one thing that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think it's the idea rather than a skill or a strategy. It's the idea of your brain isn't effed up. If
Yeah,
you're feeling
listen, say that
overloaded,
again for the people in the back.
yeah,
My goodness.
yeah, your brain is not effed up if you're experiencing overload. And
Yeah.
so just recognize that our brain has some very specific limitations that all brains have to varying degrees, but all brains have. And so you're normal and you get to figure out what strategies help you fill the gaps of this crazy thing the universe did where they gave us working memory with so little capacity and a long-term memory with such big capacity.
I mean, if there's one thing that I'm taking away from this conversation, it's that. Because no one, and so I'm happy you reiterated, but it's what I would have, it's what I would have said. Like if I was walking away from this, just
Yeah.
like, I just have this visual in my mind of like this vast space of our brain, but this tiny little portal. And no one has ever described it to me that way. And I think that teachers, parents, and like if you're looking at it from the perspective of like you're like these little brains that we're dealing with, or adult brains or teenage brains that we're dealing with, they have so much capacity, but we really need to be mindful about how are we helping them get that information into their to that long term. And I think if you think about it from that perspective, like you'll be a lot more compassionate about how you go about interacting with information with your students and helping them.
Totally.
Yeah. So Gretchen, honestly, I cannot thank you enough for the conversation. You can come back anytime because now I have so many other questions that I want to dive into. But you've given us so much to think about, but that's just practical and helpful, but also hopeful in ways. So people are just like, it's really, if you come down to when you're trying to learn or teach or support diverse minds, and so I'm saying neurotypical all the way to neurodivergent, if you just look at this as an exchange, a highway, it just makes it a little bit less, to me,
Intimidating.
less intimidating. Yeah. But beyond that, I'm just really grateful for like the work that you're doing to make learning more human. So thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a understanding of how do our brains work and how can we access information in a way that's really going to get down there into that. I guess it's not really down there in that long-term
Yeah,
memory.
I know. I mean, I've been using down, but really it's out there somewhere.
So thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for just sharing your
Yeah.
brilliance and your passion with our community. It really means so much. I know I say it on every single episode. I'm just so grateful to people who are willing to come on and give me their time and give their time to my listeners. It really does. I'm happy that people trust me to spread their message. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for the listeners who don't know this, Joy, because it's so late at night, we did mention that she wasn't sure that she'd get through this conversation without falling asleep. And I did not see you falling asleep. So good job.
Listen, the issue that's gonna come up now is that I am coaching at a school tomorrow. I have to leave my house at 6 o'clock in the morning. I
Oh,
know what's
honey.
gonna
Okay, go to bed.
no, we're fine. But what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna get off this phone call or this not this phone. I'm gonna get off this thing and I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm wide awake. Like I
Yeah.
guarantee you. So, but yes, I'm
Oh,
happy that I'm so happy that I had this conversation. But
yeah.
to everyone listening, thank you for turning in and or for tuning in. And if this episode inspired you, share it with someone who loves learning as much as you do, or who might think that they struggle with learning, because now this is going to give them the tools to see that it's really not all that as complicated as we thought it was, right? And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss a conversation. And you get a reminder when we post new episodes. And just remember that every brain is unique. And when you discover what works for your brain, you're really unlocking your greatest potentials. Thank you so much. And we will see you in the next episode. And that's a wrap for this episode of The Joy of Neurodiversity. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, empowered, and seen. Remember, neurodiversity isn't something to fix, it's something to celebrate. If you loved this episode, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. It truly helps more people find this space of understanding and joy. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. And let's keep the conversation going. Connect with me on Instagram at The Joy of Neurodiversity and LinkedIn at Joy Buckner, and share your thoughts using the hashtag The Joy of Neurodiversity. New episodes drop every other Thursday, so be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next dose of neurospicy brilliance, deep dives, and empowering conversations. Until next time, embrace who you are, celebrate how you think, and keep rewriting the narrative because the world needs your brilliance. Think big, be bold, and never dim your neurodivergent spark because we were never meant to fit in.